Well, let's hear from a company, Ordnance Survey, who I guess might be taking on California a bit in all of this, from Neil Ackroyd.
Thank you. I better declare that I come from a slightly schizophrenic background. I spent the first 3/4 of my career in the West Coast building a technology company that brought to you GPS. And when we started building GPS back in the early 80s, we really had no view as to how successful it would be. We really had no view as to how disruptive it would be. We just saw a really cool technology that we could do something with. It's taken 30 years, really, for that technology to drive a whole host of questions that we're now trying to answer. Questions around how do we deal with this new technology that delivers new capability, whether it's connected autonomous vehicles, whether it's the Internet of Things, whether it's smart cities. So I'm more interested not the data we have, but the data we need. We've done a very good job in the last few years working closely with the Department of Transport, making sure that the data we have can be brought together into a single view that can start to address some of the concerns that Shane raised. A data set that gives us consistent view of what vehicles can travel, what road widths there are, what the network design topology is, who maintains it. But that's not the data we need. The data we need needs to be designed for the future that we aspire to have. And so the data we need is data that can mediate between an autonomous vehicle and the general public, between an autonomous vehicle and society. The map we need in the future is a machine-to-machine map. It's not a map for people to consume. So at the moment we are collecting data, and there are projects that government's looking at across the world as to what does that look like? What are the standards we require to allow autonomy in our infrastructure? What does a map look like in 2025? A map that a car consumes, or a vehicle consumes, or a vehicle maps itself. How does that get mediated? Who takes responsibility and authority for that mediation? Are we going to allow every car to make a judgment about the software it runs, or are we going to provide an infrastructure and some level of authority that allows that to happen? Now, autonomy is talked about as you know, in the usual sort of Gartner hype cycle. I would like to put it in this context. I had the pleasure of building and involved in the first autonomous tractors back in 1993, 1994, and then the first autonomous earth-moving equipment back in 1996. That technology has existed for 20 years and has been operating quietly for a long time. It was only a couple of weeks ago that you could actually now go into a Caterpillar dealer or into an agriculture dealer and actually order an autonomous tractor. The irony is nobody actually has any rules or legislation to allow you to use that. So you could, today, order and take and drive around your farm and hope it doesn't go through the hedge boundary and drive onto the M11, but you can already deploy autonomous technology. So technology finds a way. It's quite interesting. We think that we control it and we develop it, but actually it finds a way. And we actually have the same problem now with autonomous cars, with drones. We have regulation and design issues to deal with the technology that's disrupted us, and we let disrupt us. So I think looking forward, the question I'll be asking is, what is the data we need for the future? Not how can we need to better use the data we have. Absolutely, that's a given. But let's design the data we need, because otherwise the technology will get there before our ability to deploy and use that technology will. And so for Ordnance Survey, that's a real challenge. We've been custodians of data for Great Britain for 225 years. We're pretty good at it, actually. We're also pretty good at, I guess, understanding how that sort of data is used. What we're not good at is understanding the huge variety of new use cases that are coming into how this data can be consumed. And we try very hard to listen. We try very hard to understand. But the industries that we work with are very different and in very different places of development. The highways industry, I think as people said, is an industry that needs to disrupt itself. Some other industries have already disrupted themselves. And we see that whether it's in traffic management, we see that whether it's in, when I say traffic management, in commercial reuse of data, in traffic planning, we see that in some of the open data communities. But at the end of the day, the ecosystem is still dominated by a number of large data organizations, be they West Coast or be they system integrators. So we have to accept it's a very complex, mixed ecosystem. So I'm echoing really back Shane's point here. There isn't one answer. There are many, many questions and many answers. Open data is absolutely part of the question, but so is significant investment in new data, data as an infrastructure. So when we talk about investing in new physical infrastructure, we really need to be talking about investing in new data infrastructure. And where are those conversations happening? They're starting to happen. They're starting to be discussed in groups who are thinking about what data for 2025 might look like. But actually, I do have a concern that we will get there before those questions are answered. And so for me, there's a certain degree of urgency about our industry pulling together and not just trying to solve the problems in our rear-view mirror, because they're real and we know they're there, but we actually have to solve the problems looking forward 5 years and 10 years for any infrastructure investment. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil.